All right, we'll just give everyone a few minutes to join before we get started. While we're waiting, Aaron, do you have a story for the items in your background?
Oh, yes. Well, I've been practicing with swords on and off for about 20 years. This is, let's see, some of those are sharp. Some of those are
Mhm.
called Iaito. They're used for Iaito training, so they're aluminum and zinc. And then some are wood. So got a whole variety there. But yeah,
That's
it's
pretty cool.
yeah, great way to blow off
That's
steam and
that's pretty awesome. I wasn't sure if you're going to be joking when you first started saying that,
no,
but that's pretty cool. What a fun
yes,
hobby. What a fun
yeah,
hobby.
yeah.
It doesn't look like you have room for any more, though.
Right. So I got to start, you know, giving them away or something to get the new ones
Never
before.
say that to a collector, Justin.
You just need a new shelf. That's all.
You're right. I think I need a new house. Yes. Okay.
All right, looks like we got some more folks in here, top of the hour. All right, well, or a few minutes after, I mean, let's get it started. So, hey, good afternoon, everybody. We wanted to say hello. Today we have Aaron and Justin joining us, and part of our discussion today is going to be when to use agents and static controls in AppSec. My name is Zach Fowler, and I'm the senior AppSec engineer here at Dry Run Security and your moderator for today. We'll try to make it even so that everybody has an equal chance to discuss their opinions on here. Aaron, would you go ahead and introduce yourself and Justin follow?
Sure. My name's Aaron Edelman. I'm a DevRel engineer focused on security at Google.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Collins. I am working on the dry run security analysis product and formerly creator of the Brakeman static analysis security tool. And my last job was CISO at Gusto.
Yeah, great, great. Well, thanks for taking some time to join us today. We're going to start off with a little bit of a warm-up presentation with these gentlemen talking about some things that they brought to share with us. So, to Aaron and Justin, before we get into solutions, help us set the scene a little bit. So, what's been changing in AppSec now that AI coding has kind of come into the picture? We're starting to see a lot of different tools. Teams are trying to rely on things or try new things. Maybe they're falling short. Uh, what are you guys seeing with some of the changes that we all know kind of have been happening? And Aaron, why don't you go start us out?
Sure. Well, just in terms of people wanting to use models as security tools.
Mhm.
So, in particular, like when this trend first started, at first there was a lot of skepticism around it. And it was, I think, people maybe with a strong data science or software engineering background who were serious about it. But then security teams were kind of saying, well, models are probabilistic. There's a lot of gaps, there's inconsistency. It's going to have a hard time replacing static tools just on the consistency basis. But then, as we started to see that models were perhaps able to discover novel things that static tools couldn't, or that were a little bit better at discovering issues such as with business logic and things that require an understanding of the application, that's where we started to see some more promise. But right now, there's kind of I would say, a false bifurcation between these, where people say it's either this or it's that, and
Mm,
really the
mm.
the more successful trend is going to be, I think, to combine these approaches in some way. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you are talking about here a little bit.
mhm, exactly.
So, but Justin, you're on the other, you're a little bit on the other side where you're helping to build tools that use AI with security in mind. Um, what are your thoughts on this? What's changed, and do you agree with what Aaron's just kind of thrown out
Of course, I agree with what Aaron was saying there.
there?
Um, and I think the big, I don't know that it's a big change, but we're all continuing to use these tools
Mhm.
and figure out how to apply them in the best ways. And just like Aaron said, there are things that you can find with the AI-based tools that you're just not going to be able to encode into, um, let's say, a legacy static analysis tool with a deterministic rule. And so we should be trying to take advantage of that if we can. But I think what we're going to be discussing today is how do we get there and what are the
Mm,
challenges?
gotcha, gotcha. Before I move off of this one, anything to add, Aaron?
I think that was great. I mean, you asked what's different too, and I think there's a perception of how researchers and potentially adversaries are using this tool that
Mm,
I would just briefly touch on. On the research perspective, it's great that we're finding vulnerabilities faster, but that means that, a lot more CVs to disclose and then a lot more things to patch. So that does create its own kind of remediation burden. And the other thing that is more striking and I think more immediate, like just for the time, is that between releasing a CVE and a patch and saying you need to go fix this and actually implementing it, on average takes about 20 days. For someone to reverse engineer that CVE and come up with an exploit is much faster. So there is now this dual pressure of much more genuine vulnerability and remediation process to take care of, and then also this much faster time to exploit. So that's kind of why time is of the essence to get these tools working.
Well, you actually kind of helped me bleed into my next question for you guys. So
Sure.
this is great.
Yeah.
So AI tools are helping to really skyrocket development, right? That's what we hear. But they're also, there's this idea that AppSec will never be able to keep up. And here's some stats that we have. 87% of misuse introduced by Claude, and yet all this stuff happens so fast, right? Had some sort of vulnerability. Um, 20 times the code volume in the enterprise, we think, are going to be in the next 1.5, 2 years out. And then 78% of those flaws, we think, are undetectable by SAST. That could kind of be a pretty serious issue. Um, what can we do about this? Has AppSec been broken by the velocity that AI has been bringing to the development teams?
Well,
Aaron
uh,
or
I
Justin? Yes,
think,
go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, just to go along with these numbers, I think it's very clear that code velocity has increased. And I think beyond the technical capabilities, just the current state of the industry is pushing for speed. And it's pushing for getting things
Mm,
out faster, getting ahead of your competitors or perceived competitors faster. And as usual,
mhm.
that means security kind of takes a back seat. And if we can't keep up, right, then it's just gonna be like, well, then like we'll figure it out later, right? We're gonna ship now, we'll figure out security later. And so I do think that there is a moment here for AppSec in terms of how do we keep up? What can we do about it? And what can we do on the tooling side to, again, help with that velocity and take advantage of the capabilities that are increasing every day?
So hopefully AppSec can also increase our velocity to help cover these new vulnerabilities and issues that get popped so frequently, it seems. Yeah. Okay. Um, I didn't mention this, but if you have any questions, by the way, we're going to do some Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat while you're here. And then Haley, who's off camera right now, she's going to kind of sort through those questions and give us a shout out at the end for anything that has come up. So feel free to drop those along the way, and we'll be happy to sort through and get to those as we can. So here we've put this together as when you might want to be able to use which. And now here we're talking about static controls or maybe deterministic methods versus agentic or LLM based reviews. Um, Justin, what is the first thing that jumps out to you on this screen, whether good or bad?
Well, I think the key piece here is don't throw away your deterministic tools, especially if you already have them in place. If you have specific code patterns, or if you're using standard frameworks that have known good and bad patterns, there's no reason to stop using those tools if they are working for you. Um, in particular, you're going to have a speed advantage with those tools generally over
Mhm.
the LLM-based tools. And you have the deterministic piece. You know that every time you run it, you're going to get the same results. If that code pattern that you know about is in your code, those tools will find it. And I like that we have on this slide here. agentic review for code patterns that you can detect with a deterministic static tool, that's kind of a waste. That's a waste of resources. That's a waste of time. If you have a tool that can already detect it, you don't need to throw that out.
That's a good point. Yeah. Aaron, what are your thoughts on this one? What's your gut
Yeah,
check on this?
there's two things that I would add or elaborate on the static control side, where we see best for each of
Hmm.
these. Those are also lists that need to be constantly updated very often. So we need to check like what's the latest CVE. Maybe our team wants to enter a pattern. So it's just a matter of kind of staying up to date and knowing that you have the latest version. That's some of the benefit of having something deterministic. I see a lot outside of just scanning code, things like I don't know, consuming threat intelligence, like looking at known malicious URLs or IP addresses or things of that sort in other parts of security. Their static tools are still kind of the best option too, just because they can give you that assured up-to-date list. And then on the agent side or the model side, I would I would also stress that does require some configuration, right? So you mentioned earlier that
Mm.
all
Mm.
these code generating tools are shipping vulnerable code, and then here we're saying that it's good at finding, these potential gaps. To answer the difference between those, I think that's where we're starting to look at skills, tools, things that the agents have at the time of writing code and reading code that are really going to help. So, even if AppSec is kind of broken at this point, I think one place to really help is actually what's also a source of risk, which is at development, and take it from being this bad thing that's, shipping stuff that is low quality to being this thing that's actually making AppSec easier because it does a better job at the first place.
Got it. Interesting. I might want to ask you guys to dive in a little bit more on those blended answers a little bit later, because those are really some interesting points that we might expand on. Okay, Justin, any last thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I would like to follow up on what Aaron was saying about, you mentioned skills, right? We're talking
Hmm.
about review, which just kind of tends to be either at the PR time or maybe even after PR time, before deployment. And I think what folks should keep in mind, and I know most AppSec practitioners are doing this today, but sometimes things can get lost when new technology comes around, which is we have to be
Hmm.
covering the whole development lifecycle and understanding where we can fit in.
Mhm.
So skills are
Yeah,
great
good point. Yeah.
at the beginning. Skills and context are great during the code generation time. But we also know that LLMs are happy to disregard instructions that they've been given, or it
Yep.
falls out of the context window, or they
Mhm.
just decide, "Ah, I'm not going to do that. This
Yep.
time, for whatever reason, I'm not going to do it." So
Mhm.
it's really helpful. Of course, we should be doing it. We should also be having review, right, at the after the code has been generated, and all, again, it just follows that, development life cycle that we've been talking about for many, many years, and figuring out all the places that we can insert security to help with the end result, which is more secure products, keeping
Hmm.
people and businesses safe.
Yeah, so we're really, what you're saying is we're kind of tackling the same problems, I guess, in new tools, but we still have to think of the full cycle. It's not just about code generation. No, that's a really good point. Thank you. Aaron, for those that are starting to work on the agentic tools, right? Let's assume that most of our attendees here, like maybe there's some history in an AppSec program, they've built one, they're using static analysis or traditional tools, deterministic tools. Maybe they're just starting to get in. Um, let's talk about what we see when we start looking at bringing agents into a secure development lifecycle, like
Mhm.
what Justin was saying.
Mhm. Yeah. So in particular, there are constraints with context and a tendency, like when getting started with these, to try to load a bunch of tools into an agent all at
Hmm.
once and see what it produces. And there is definitely a point of diminishing return where the agent starts to not do as good a job at the review. One thing in particular I think we'll cover later is that if it's reviewing a fairly small diff, that you solve a lot of those context problems. If you can confine it to one language or one file or one function or
Mm.
like smaller and smaller sections to review, just like a human reviewer, it's a little bit easier to not switch context so much or not have so many things to keep in mind. But there's also a sequence that I would go through, like a logical sequence of when to use various tools and when to apply a review and so forth, that is deterministic in a sense. Justin rightly pointed out that very often, if we just define things as rules, there's a way to skip them. But through a plugin and hook architecture where you're requiring certain steps before, like, say, git commit, you have to run this tool and get this sort of result, you can define that in a script and make it so that the agent can't modify the contents of that file, just has to run the script.
Hmm.
So there's some ways to constrain this. Again, to Justin's point, I think with agents, it's very much a best effort. I would see agents much closer to like supplementing a person helping with this review than an actual tool, precisely because you want something more automated and less easily influenced to be the gate, right? So we're not strictly relying on this, but if you can define the process to an agent, it's just like with a person. I mean, if you give someone a play-by-play of like, here's the steps that you should follow, and here's when it's relevant to do this type of scan or think about this kind of code base, it just kind of helps them focus a bit more, so to speak.
Hmm. Hmm. Sounds like we can't really trust the agents yet.
Yeah, I mean, and
Working on it.
you'll benefit much more from them if you put them behind some guardrails, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some teams are starting to see that.
Mhm.
The third place or the third line here down, replace rules too early, like binary auth and compliance. That feels like a different piece of the SDLC that maybe LMs are working differently in. What is your experience with the binary auth and compliance side? Right there, LMs are not deterministic. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Well, I think, you know, thinking of this holistically, right?
Hmm.
And I know Aaron didn't say it explicitly, but you can't just take your whole code base and hand it to an agent and say, like, tell me the security vulnerabilities. I mean, you can try that, but you're not going to get good results, and you're definitely not going to get consistent results.
Yeah,
And
that's important.
yeah, and one of the challenges is if you do need to show something like we have reviewed the entire application, right? Every file has been reviewed by a tool. Even if you tell an agent review every single file, like you don't know that it's going to actually review every single file. You don't know which files it may have just skipped. So having that deterministic, yeah, every single file, we know the set of rules that were run. We know the code patterns that would be matched if they were there, they were not, or they were, depending on what the rules are. So again, we said this earlier. Um, this isn't okay, everything has to be AI now, so I'm going to replace all of my deterministic static analysis tools with LLM-based tooling because, again, we can get some guarantees from the deterministic tooling that we just can't from the AI-based tooling.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Aaron, looks like you brought some Dora research to talk about. I'm just going to hand you the microphone for a little bit because I think you're the expert here.
Sure. So yeah,
So
these were
talk to us
just
about some of
findings.
these. Yeah.
Yeah. So these were from last year's store report, 2025. So there's a new one coming out hopefully soon. But um, in particular, it's looking at how certain development practices in general can contribute to making those reviews a little bit easier, to ensuring that there's high quality code, and in particular, making teams feel very confident with refactoring or with remediation. Like if they need to make a code change and they're following these practices, it's going to contribute a lot more to software stability. They're not going to accidentally take down production when they try to fix an issue. They're following this closely. So one thing we found was that teams that use that have generally smaller batches, their diffs are smaller, that give AI coding agents a lot of internal context. So the APIs that they use, the coding conventions, product documentation, these types of things. And that they're also making frequent small commits that are easy to roll back if they need to. Really kind of helps them with two things with throughput. So they're actually shipping a lot more code doing it this way in tiny slices, as opposed to these huge, attempts at one-shotting or big design up front. Funny enough, if you do it with small commits, you actually end up shipping more. And second of all, they have more stability. They're not running into so many issues down the line. Their CI/CD pipeline is less taxed. The tests are more of kind of a final assurance than something that their developers are relying on to really catch issues. If we go to the next slide, I think I have more detail on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So this was just talking about specifically the code quality based on internal access. So if an agent is able to see, oh, you use these types of helper methods or that type of schema, or oh, you
Mm.
want your code written, you want Rust written this particular way, it will generally require less human review effort. I think that's a big thing to point out. So your reviews get to be more focused on architectural weaknesses, perhaps, or hey, does this make sense from a user perspective? And it's not so much, oh, the way that you indented this is not, per our guidelines. So you're really kind of getting rid of the toilsome stuff, the boring, repetitive stuff by giving the agent kind of more of a sense of what it's working with. Next,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this again, I mentioned about the commit frequency. If people are committing a lot, with AI tools, then they feel more productive because if it runs into a bottleneck, let's say it's refactoring or you run a security tool locally and it finds an issue and you need to fix it, if your last checkpoint was way before that and all of a sudden it wipes out your work or there's an issue that's kind of intractable, it's very frustrating if you don't have like a very clear version history. So this tends to help people by themselves or working with agents, either way. The next one. Oh, yeah, and if you have questions, let me know. And I think we've been stressing
Yeah.
this point all along, but what we're kind of supplementing by giving the agent context, skills, rules, all this, what we're supplementing there is some developer security education, right? That's basically the thing that we're swapping in here. Imagine you take a developer and you train them in application security 101 and good coding practices and where to find all the right files in a project. That's all you're helping support. You're not replacing all those other kind of gates, I think, as we've discussed quite a bit. But you are, I think, as Justin clarified earlier, even if it's not perfect and there's ways to bypass all those, internal rules, so to speak, it's still significantly less overhead over time, right? You're not creating quite as many security issues. So it's a best effort type thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Justin, so this is, representation of a pipeline. Um, where in these places are you seeing the most benefit from using the agentic tooling versus some of the static tooling, or maybe there's a little bit of a blend in each? Context clearly is probably going to lean towards the models, but can you kind of talk about, you've kind of talked about blending both throughout the pipeline. Can you expand on that a little bit here?
Well, it's really going to depend on what your development pipeline looks like. And I know
Hmm.
this is a generic one. Clearly, as you said, where you have less concrete code, then LLMs are going to shine a little bit more, right? If it's, okay, help me brainstorm a threat model, given the context of this is my business, this is the application, and this is what I want to build, like what are the security things I should worry about? An LLM's going to help you a lot more there than a static analysis tool would. But I like, what Aaron was saying too about um, the feedback loops that you can have. And why not have the deterministic tooling providing feedback, especially if it's, a relatively fast tool, right? Give that feedback back to the coding agent, right? And you can do that, let's say at the per commit level. Um, but you can also have things like skills, and you can have tools that the agent calls to provide, again, that security context, security feedback. It could be company specific as well, right? Like we do things this way. This is our authorization pattern. Or, hey, I'm working on this kind of application. Either it's, hey, this is customer facing, or hey, we're B2B and this is an API, and it needs to be locked down in these ways. That's going to be good context for the coding agent. But then we also come back to those gates that we want to have at various points, which are generally going to be at the PR level, right? Or and not or, but and generally before deployment, where we do want to be running the full test suite. And again, going back to having assurance like, hey, every file was inspected, right? With the same set of rules. And we know what those rules are because they were defined somewhere. That's going to be your deterministic tooling. And then at the same time you're running that tooling, you can be running the AI-based tooling uh, to also be looking for those things that the static rules are not going to
Okay, thank you. Um, so we know that Drywin is building, AI native code scanning, code security, and but what I wanted to kind of point out is, these here follow or at least SAS, SCA, DAST. These follow our traditional toolings, right? Static, we kind of know what we get out of static SAS, SCA, DAST, right? For SAS and for SCA, um, what what are you seeing as the benefits out of adding in agentic tools on a SaaS scan, Justin? And you're definitely working very deep in this right now. So talk to us about that.
Well, one of the benefits that you can have is essentially like false positive reduction, right? If you say like, okay, well, here's a bunch of code patterns that matched. Generally, it's hard for a deterministic tool to understand, okay, but what was the context of that code? What was around it? What was the intent? How does it fit into the larger application? And so one thing, and I've definitely seen folks doing this, is take the output of the deterministic tools and have an AI-based tool review them and validate them for you. And then that essentially, again, it's reducing the false positives. For
Mhm.
SCA, it's a little bit more challenging in some ways. It's different in some ways. Uh, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, okay, there's a CVE, but do I care about it? Right?
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, we can. uh, The knowing whether a CVE applies to your code based on just dependency matching is a solved problem, right? Like it's not that hard. Some of the orchestration is tricky, but here's a list of versions, here's the version numbers. We can do that matching. But and people have known this for quite a long time, right? Most of the CVs do not apply to you, right?
Right.
Hmm.
But how do you make that determination? Um,
Yeah.
Adding on an LLM-based tool with the right information and context and guidance can help with that investigation. Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to add, so, we're talking about reviewing SAST findings. Um, and also the potential problem we mentioned earlier that models, at least as a component of agents, can sometimes skip certain steps or add steps that don't exist and potentially contribute to false positives. So there's still an art to getting it to output the right results. But I think one other remarkable thing I'd point out is being able to take findings from deterministic tools, so SAS and SCA, and then looking at potential ways they could be combined together, right? So taking individual findings and seeing, hey, overall, does this contribute to something bad? Or looking at the context of the application and saying, hey, I've got this static finding. I want to evaluate its relevance. I think Justin said earlier, where does it fit? What was the intent of putting it here in the application? So it's adding detail. The one thing to be wary of, though, is in addition to its potential to lower false positives, it could also lead to false negatives where you're missing a real signal, right? So I'm
Mm.
just kind of curious, Justin, how people can mitigate that and get agents to not just turn down the noise, but make sure they don't miss any of the signal.
Yeah, I think the real tricky thing is essentially how are you prompting, right? And I think what's important for people to understand is, it's kind of become like a meme now. It's like, don't make any mistakes, right? But there's a security equivalent, which is like, find all the vulnerabilities, right?
Mhm.
Only write secure code. And those are kind of just as useless as don't make any mistakes, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it does come down to, in that context of reviewing findings, right? You might want to have a bias towards, hey, if you can't fully rule out this finding, then I still want to know about it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and really, yeah, it comes down to a lot of tuning on how you're instructing the agent, what information you're giving it, and what is the default behavior. If the default behavior is like, well, I couldn't find a way to exploit this, or, which could happen because it doesn't have the right context. If the default behavior is, okay, it was a false positive. Like I can't
Mhm.
make sense of it, so it was a false positive,
Mhm.
that might be a problem, right? You
Mhm.
might want to bias towards, hey, if you can't quite figure this out, if you can't build, if you can't follow these rules and come up with, hey, it's crossed some threshold, then default to saying it is a true positive,
Right.
for
Right.
example.
Mhm.
I think, you know, the challenge, I guess it depends on the challenges that your team has. If your challenge is we have too many findings and we can't figure out how to prioritize them, and it wouldn't matter, how much time we have, there's no way we're going to look at 1,000 findings or 10,000 findings, then you might want to bias towards, okay, like tell me the stuff that you like very confident
Mhm.
these are exploitable and they need to be addressed quickly.
Yep.
If your team doesn't have that problem, if your team is like, hey, what we really want is thorough results, really good findings, interesting findings, um, and we just want to accelerate the investigation. So provide as much context as possible, provide potential routes to exploiting it, provide potential fixes. Um, then you're not so worried about the false positive side, and you're just like, okay. And I've certainly, it's funny because I've seen both sides of this. Like there are teams that are like, hey, if there's a single finding coming out of my tool, I'm gonna fix it.
Mhm.
Like we're gonna keep it at inbox 0. And then there are teams that are like, look, we've got this old application with so much history to it and so many old findings, and like there's no way we would ever triage all of these. So
Mhm.
it really just depends on where your team is,
Mhm.
where the product is, and what it is you're trying to optimize for,
Mhm.
which direction you go with things. But in the end, you can't just say, okay, tell me only true positives.
Right.
It's just
Make no mistakes, right?
yeah, make
Yeah.
no mistakes. That's just not an approach that's going to
Right. Very cool.
Darn, that's too bad.
Mhm.
work.
Well, speaking of approaches, Justin, you've been working on this at Dryrun, where Dryrun has been in the thick of this for a little while, and you brought a couple slides over with us to share and talk about, like how can you like bring in the agents, bring in the non-deterministic tooling to build out, and I mean here you say not just patterns, paths. Can you talk about the slide a little bit and what you're doing with this contextual security analysis?
Sure, and it's great. I think we've been building up to this really well. Um, if you're thinking about, okay, how do I introduce LLMs or agents into our code review? Um, and I know we're joking a little bit, but I think when it comes down to it, and you're like, okay, um, I've got some tokens, I've got a code base, you can't just say, all right, go review the code base. You can't just shove the whole code base into the context window. It's unlikely to work. And even if you could, you might want to provide a little bit more information. And what we have been working on at Dry Run for quite some time is what context is necessary, right, to get good results, and how do we target the parts of the code that are most important so that you can get the best findings out with the fewest false positives. And where that starts is just like a human reviewing a code base. You don't you don't start with like, okay, I open the first file, I start at the first line, and I start reading, right? You try to understand, what is this application? Where does it fit? Is it internal, external? What kind of code base? What frameworks is it using? What libraries is it using? Um, and then, okay, what is the structure of it? What is the architecture? Is it API? What are the routes? What are the authorization points? And building that out before reviewing the code is going to give you a lot better results, right? And that's kind of what we've laid out here. And then it's funny, we were just talking about reviewing deterministic findings. The findings that come out of an LLM, the way we approached it is those also get reviewed, right?
Mm.
It's kind of like, and Zach, I know you've done some work on this, but and we presented it, right? Is okay, so the coding agent produces the code. Why doesn't it just make it secure to start from? Okay, so then we need like another agent to review the code. And ideally, you have different context for the coding agent versus the review agent. And you might be using a completely different model as well. And that can be beneficial to say like,
Mhm.
okay, well, this model, it was trained a little bit differently, it has a little bit different idea of how to do things. Okay, so output from this model, let's have this other model review it. And look at things like, okay, well, there was this finding, but can it actually be exploited? Like, is there a path to exploiting it, for example? And then after the review, and you probably filtered out a bunch of findings, then we can add things like, okay, well, given all of that information and a finding, how do we fix it, right? What is the appropriate way of fixing it? And is there, at that point, if you're building this kind of thing, you might want to reintroduce your company specific guidelines, right? Oh, well, we have an internal library that does authorization, so it should look like this. Or we prefer, I don't know, this ORM. So, it should be following these patterns, it should be following these best practices. And that's information that you can pull back in and then have as part of the remediation guidance that gets generated.
Okay, that's quite a lot actually. So there's probably a lot of AppSec engineers out there that need to support their program, and we've talked about the problems of breaking AppSec with AI, which is not really breaking; we're just changing it. We talked about the velocity of code, and everything, and kind of the last thing that we wanted to talk about here today. We all talked about before. We're like, say you start working on it, you start building it, you are learning about how to use agents. 5 things to determine whether this works out in production. So, to either of you, feel free to jump in. Um, where are hotspots here? Aaron, Justin just talked, so we'll let you start off here.
Sure, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, all five of these stand. The biggest part that I would want to add to it or consider to frame these is that, you know, the real value hits with the actual remediation, and that's what's going to be very, very taxing in some cases. And I think Justin mentioned a great example of, different scenarios you might be in. Some teams, inbox zero, but in a lot of cases, and I mean this includes open source projects, companies that have legacy code bases and are really just playing catch up in many ways. With that volume issue that I mentioned earlier of new real vulnerabilities that are coming out in a much smaller exploit window, there is a lot of pressure to remediate faster. And we're getting to the point where doing that with, just with people is looking less and less like it could possibly happen. And so providing the right guidance for remediation, but also just thinking more on the operational side of some of the risks that might entail, of making sure that you've got other practices in line, that you've got good release engineering and maybe some SRE or DevOps practices for how you track whether a patch makes it to production and really works there. There's like a whole other side of this coin that both agents and static tools can have a role in and can help lower that operational risk. So that's one thing, like just to consider the remediation angle and how what you're doing isn't just scanning and notifying and prioritizing, it's also setting up the right remediation effort, like a trackable
Mm,
remediation. That's part of it. And then I guess the other part is that we've touched on a bit, but like being able to use different models, knowing when you kind of need the model and when you don't, that helps to answer a lot of the cost and consumption questions around like, do I really need to use a model like for every single diff? When am I actually using these things? I don't want to burn my token budget on things that are not really imminent risks or posture issues. So yeah, getting tactical with tokens and also just keeping in mind that whole question is constantly changing. The economics of using these models is changing
yeah.
pretty frequently. So yeah.
Yeah, they're getting better and also more expensive.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that it makes it challenging.
Right.
Um, I really like this slide because we've got like very tactical suggestions here
Mhm.
for practitioners. Um, Justin, we'll start with you. What would be one thing that you would tell an AppSec team or engineer they're doing now and trying to bring on agents, LLMs, that they should stop doing?
One thing they should stop doing.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I think I've kind of said it already, but thinking that you're just going to somehow throw all of your code at a model and say, all right, tell me the vulnerabilities,
Hmm.
you're not going to get good results, and you're not going to get any kind of consistent result. And it's just not going to work out for you, right? So that would be one thing. Maybe the other thing is to maybe avoid some of the, let's say, noise around, okay, well, like the next model is, I will be able to do that with the next model. Like the next model is going to solve everything for me. The next model is going to find all
Mm,
of the vulnerabilities. And and then maybe it's going to triage and fix them for me too, right? That's just not the reality that we are seeing.
mm,
Even though capabilities, yes, are increasing, um, that again, we're nowhere near a stage where you can just say, okay, go fix everything for me, make everything secure, and hopefully no one is thinking that that is true. But I do think that there's this idea of like before you've stepped into this slide, right, which is uh, okay, how do I kind of get started, or even the earlier slide about okay, I have a prototype that kind of worked and it produces some findings. So now I just have to turn it on in production. There's a lot of work to go into this in terms of how do we orchestrate all of that? How do I get consistent findings? What is the right context? I
yeah.
mean, even just down to the basics of LLMs, how do I prompt it right? Right? What are the agents that I need? I liked Aaron's point about, you don't give one agent all the tools and have it go do everything. Well, great. Then again, if you start building this out, you're gonna say, okay, okay, well, what are the different agents that I might want to have? How do they work together? Which ones get which tools? Which ones get which context? And how do I tie all of that together? It is a lot more than, okay, how do I craft a single prompt that will cover everything for me? So I guess stop thinking that that's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen similar things, Aaron, but if what is something that you've seen or seen out in the wild that you would
Mhm.
suggest AppSec teams, practitioners stop doing so they can
Mhm.
like get better benefits of this static and
Sure.
agentic tooling?
I would say avoid perfectionism in favor for a progressive and layered approach. What I mean by that is, and I saw this a lot even before, the AI and LLM kind of boom with general DevSecOps transformations at fairly large companies where they realize, oh, we'll save a lot and get a lot of returns by, shifting left and doing things a bit earlier and getting, scanning in the right places. But then in the first 6 months of those projects, they'd often fail either because there wasn't really good kind of top-down commitment to doing it. It was more experimental, like, let's see how this goes. Oh, it slows things down. Okay, never mind. Or people adding all of these new tools and new processes and having them without much configuration breaking the build. And so
Mm,
developers do not like that. And Justin really pointed out a great point earlier that companies are under a lot of pressure to deliver, to ship quickly, 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 at least in certain verticals and cultures and whatnot. And so when developers, who are producing the value say, hey, security is slowing us way down with these tools that are telling us nothing and it's breaking our builds, that really
yeah,
hurts security's position in general. And
yeah,
so instead of saying, oh, it doesn't catch everything, it's not 100% perfect, instead of that being the criteria to take or pass on a tool, just think, oh, no, wait, at this layer, if I just get a little bit, better signal, how much does that improve my overall posture? Start to think in those broader terms and tolerate that there's going to be some adoption period. And you're just going
yeah,
to, keeping that kind of open mind, you'll be able to show where things are adding value without creating so much friction with people, I think.
I think
yeah. And yeah, go
that's
ahead, please.
great with number 4 on this slide, right?
Yeah.
And I know we've been talking about it.
Mhm.
And I think if you look in the news, a lot of what you see is like, hey, look, we scanned Linux or we scanned, Firefox or whatever, and we found these all these vulnerabilities. But that's not most AppSec practitioners' lives, right? It's mostly, okay, we have these internal tools that we are developing, and there are, we want to have some assurance around our security and we want to catch things before they go out the door. And I think a really great way of starting, honestly, with any security tool, but with this approach is, okay, there was something that we found out about. Maybe we found it internally, maybe Bug Bounty found it. Um, and our deterministic tools, like we can't figure out how to write a rule for this, or we know it's not possible. If you can start with just like, okay, can I get an LLM based tool to find this one thing, this one class of issue, and then introduce that into the development lifecycle, well, then you've done just what Aaron said, right? You've now
Mhm.
you didn't take anything away because you have all your same tools that you've had the whole time, but now okay, this, and I'm going to say pattern, but I mean like, this code issue. We now have a capability that can find that type of issue, and we didn't have that capability before. Well, now you've won as a security team, right?
Yeah,
You have an increased capability to find a vulnerability that you could not find before, and you know it's a real issue because you've had it before. So that's that sort of incremental, okay, now we have one more thing that we can find. And once we are confident about that and we are confident that it's working, then we can move to the next one. And again, this is moving away from the I'm going to find all the vulnerabilities in my code base all at once, because again, that's not the reality that most of us are working in.
yeah, yeah. This is super interesting. We know that LLMs, at least in our own experience here at Dry Run, are really, really good at finding the next level static analysis findings like logic gaps, IDORs, multi-tenancy issues, right? We've seen that in our practice. So we know that this non-deterministic tooling can work, but you got to kind of figure out how to do it well for your org, put it in piecemeal, use it for verification, make sure you have verification on it. So there's a lot that really goes into building it, but you get some good value out of it. And of course, this is something that we do here at Dry Run. We'd be happy to talk more about the specifics. But we are a little over time, but we do have a couple of questions that came in. So I'm assuming, Aaron, you're good if I move over to the questions and didn't have anything else to add to this. Okay.
That's great.
So the first one, let me pull it up over here, came in is, here we go. So, okay, this is going to be common, I think. We already run SAST, STA, and secrets in our CI and our pipelines. At what point in the pipeline does an agentic review add value that we're not already getting? And how do we avoid duplicating noise? We kind of talked about this a little bit, but Aaron, I'm going to pass this over to you on that question.
Yeah, and we have talked about it before, and we also really went into the nuance before too.
Yeah.
Um, but I would just say, assuming that you're doing both scans, that the deduplication piece, there's a lot of tools and a lot of ways to kind of go over that. Your ultimate goal though is to like winnow down, the initial findings into groups or patterns.
Mm,
So ultimately you want to be able to take a million kind of raw findings and find, especially in the cases Justin mentioned where the team is totally inundated and they really want like the important things compared against historical data. Look for sensitive parts of your application. If you've got 1,000 repos, don't scan all of them. Pick the one first. Pick the ones that are going to be, containing customer facing applications and very sensitive internal ones like control planes. And then from there, I mentioned threat modeling a bit earlier and didn't go into detail. You could, by the way, have a threat modeling agent that
mm,
handles, goes through first and says, okay, based on this application, yeah, I'm not going to do a deep scan, but I am going to say focus on X, Y, and Z components like this function, this particular auth flow, etc. These are the critical areas. So you're avoiding the duplication by having the agent maybe more focused at first, and then you're
mhm,
getting rid of the duplication by looking at, oh wait, this particular rule that was violated happens or occurs within this function that this other agent had an issue with. Let's combine these into one kind of unit, one finding. So you're ultimately trying to get from
mm.
a million disparate little pieces to some coherent stories of like, here's why this is a bad thing. Justin, maybe you got some more kind of tactical.
Well, actually, I got another
Oh,
question that came in
okay,
that is going to a little challenge what you were just saying there. I'll give
sure.
Justin a chance to kind of maybe
Mhm.
debate on you a little bit. So you're talking about adding those into your controls or
Mhm.
into your control plane. How do you determine when an agent is trustworthy enough to enforce security decisions in a CI/CD? That's a really good practical
Uh,
question.
I wonder. So there's two sides to that trust, right? The first is we're confident that if there's something to be found, it will find it. I think that's
Yeah.
that's probably maybe a little bit more challenging. um, but the other side is like essentially, in practical terms, it's like when do we block a build based on a finding, right? And uh, I mean, this isn't really any different than any other security tooling that you might be introducing. There are ways to approach it. For example, run it on historical pull requests.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, Run it in a silent mode where maybe security team is reviewing findings, but you're not getting in anyone's way. Until you get a sense of like, okay, I'm getting good information out of it, and it's not blowing up PRs with like 1,000 findings, and then you can turn it on if you when you feel comfortable with it. One thing that I would also kind of mention is that, well, one, it comes down to the culture in your engineering organization, right? Um, but I think most places now are just so used to getting some kind of automated code review feedback that you don't have to be too worried about it, right? Like people
mm,
understand these are not perfect. They are, LLM based, so you get some weirdness sometimes. So yeah, as long as the company is already kind of comfortable with like, well, we have other code review agents. Of course, you should also have a security code review agent that goes along with it. So again, it's not really any different than any other rollout. Start small, start with known issues, start with known gaps, and turn things up slowly is going to be the most conservative approach. Some places maybe you can just turn it on and be like, hey, give me feedback and roll with it.
mm.
It really depends on the culture. Um, but again, the trustworthiness is something you're going to have to test and check, because here's the other thing. Just because it works for one code base and one, or maybe like, you see someone give a talk and they're like, hey, this thing worked great for us. Maybe your code base is a different language, it's a different framework, and it's something that requires different context. So yeah, you really just have to test it and try it out,
Mm.
see what the results look like, and see what your confidence level is in it. And maybe find a team that is you have a good relationship with, and have them test it with you to start off with, right? What do you think of these findings? Is this useful? Is it saying stuff that doesn't make any sense and isn't true? And work through that with a development team. That can also be a really useful approach.
Cool. All right. Anything else you would
Yeah.
add there, Aaron?
Yeah,
Uh,
Justin, that was a great answer. And as you were describing it, I was thinking of SRE and how, at what point in operations is it safe to have your rollout process be determined purely through automation? And I think one way that at least we see it in the SRE practice at Google is whether our service level objectives are being closely monitored on a rollout. If we're very confident that what we're monitoring is kind of what our users are experiencing, and we build automation based on those signals, then we can do completely automated canary deployments. We're rolling out a new feature across our whole environment, and if it starts breaking, it'll automatically detect that and fix it. So I'm thinking, comparing that to security here, and specifically to agents, just building confidence in some of those thresholds that you described earlier. Like if it has all these signals, that is definitely a block. If it's in this middle range, maybe that's an actionable posture issue. Maybe it's something with the code hygiene or the way I'm doing validation, but it's not exploitable, so it's not a block per se. Maybe it's just like more of a notice. And then down to, I really don't know about this, but I don't want to completely ignore it. So a notify, down to an ignore. So like there's this whole range between actively blocking something and completely ignoring it, where we have this really healthy, room to operate in between. Because we're dealing with something probabilistic, so we should have a probabilistic range, so to speak. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are real close to time. I don't think I have enough time to bring in another one of the questions. But if you have submitted a question, looks like there's a couple there. We will follow up with you, or have Aaron and Justin give you a personal email afterwards to get your question addressed. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Google. Thank you, Dryrun, for lending your time to us to kind of go through some of these questions. Super interesting. We've got a lot of experience here that we've shared, and I appreciate your views on the question of how do we do this blend between static control, static tools, and agentic LLM-based tools too for AppSec. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach.
Zero. Yeah. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Zach.